Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like Caylus 1303. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going way back in time to the year 1303 actually, where we're going to be building buildings and getting different resources and building the castle. Today we're taking a look at Caylus 1303. This was one of the first main worker placement games back in the day. The original came out I think in 2005. And this is a redone version by the original designer and also redeveloped with Space Cowboys, where they tried to more modernize it, put more modern mechanisms, bring the game to today's standards. So, did it do this? Well, let's find out. I'll show you how to play. I'll see you on the other side. In Caylus, it's a worker placement game where you'll be having some resources to manage that you'll be getting when you go to different buildings. You'll also be building these buildings for points and using different character abilities throughout the game. The game is played over 9 rounds. Each round you'll go through a planning phase where players will be placing workers on buildings. And there's some spaces printed on the board, and then there's a randomized setup for some starting buildings in which order they come in. So players will take clockwise turns placing workers, and there can never be more than 1 worker per spot. At some point, a player is going to pass, even if they have workers left, and then everyone else, if they place workers, they basically have to spend 2 workers instead of 1, but once everybody passes, then that's the end of that phase. Then essentially you activate. You'll start at the bottom of this hill here, and you'll go through, and any place there's a worker, that worker will get activated. For example, this player will get a stone, because that's what here. This player will get a food. This player can spend an additional worker to get one of the resources, and so on and so forth. And the workers that were placed don't come back to you. They go to a camp, because at the end of the round, you'll be getting a certain amount of these workers back. There's a couple special spots that would activate before the ones I showed you. And these have to do with moving this provost character here. So let's talk about how this works. This will allow you to move it 1 or 2, forward or backwards. And this one, in this order, players can decide if they want to spend 1 worker every time they move this up to 3 times. And why is this so important? And keep in mind, this is happening before all those other things I talked about, but now that you know the basics. Now this is important because every round the provost starts right next to the last building built, and anything in front of him will not activate. So if it ended like this red player would not be able to activate this building, but this green player who's behind it would. So the different players are sort of negotiating, talking about who's going to do what, who wants to spend workers to move them, and players are going to mess each other over because if the provost is like that, then this player will be able to get something. But if the other players and such move it back here, then neither of these players are going to be able to activate their buildings. And this is a big part of the game. What makes it different is negotiating for who's going to be moving that thing, who's paying the workers, who's going to the spot to actually move it, and things like that. And this provost stops anyone above it from activating their buildings. And one of the spots you can go to is up here in the castle. Each player can only go here once, but there's an order. And you have to basically turn in food and any other 2 resources. None of them can be the same resource. Essentially, you'll get 5 points. And you can do this as many times as you have resources for. And whoever does it the most is going to gain favor that round. If it's tied, whoever went here earliest. Favor is in the first 3 rounds, you can take basically this ability. If it's in these rounds, you can do this or this. And if it's the last 3 rounds, you can take it from any of them. Essentially, it's giving you some resources. So you can either take the favor by taking using one of those buildings that you can, depending on the round. And you can take one of the available special ability tiles, meaning that you can have multiples of these because everyone starts with 1. Now, if you didn't want to do that, instead of taking the favor from this side of the board and taking one of these, you can steal an ability tile from another player. Now, in a future round or earlier that round, if someone had the ability to go here because they had this fabric resource, they could spend it to put a house on, one of the starter buildings. So let's say they picked this one, they would put a house here like that. And that's important because at the end of the round, this is now going to flip over to a residence, and now at the end of the round, this player is going to be able to get, in this case, 1 more worker than normal. But even more importantly, it's changing the economy of the game, meaning this tile is no longer available. Meaning if people make residences of all the same type of resources, like you could end up doing to all the food, then those become harder to come by. Now we'll talk about some other better buildings later, but then everyone's going to get a certain amount of workers. Most of the time it's 3 plus any of the other special ones I just showed you, unless you're playing with 5 players and it's more. Then you'll reset the provost and go to the next round. Now some spots like this one allow you to build buildings. In this case, it is a wood building. And there's all sorts of different ones, like these ones give you 2 wood, a resource of any type, getting a favor, selling fabric for points, things like that. You can choose one of these. You just have to be able to spend the resources, in this case like a wood and any one of these 4 resources, and you can build this building and you'll get that many points. And when it's built, it goes on the next spot, and whoever built it will put their colored building here. Now this is important, having different buildings, because if another player goes to this building, they have to, basically this player that owns it will get a point. So now what does this building do? This allows you to build stone buildings. And so this allows you to build any of these. You know, you pay the cost, and then you put that building in the last spot there. And these all do different things, but a lot of them bring in the new resource of gold. And gold is important because it's the resource that you'll need to build these monument buildings. These are the best buildings, and these essentially will upgrade some of those starter buildings that you've built earlier in the game. Because at the end of the round, anybody that has a residence, if they want to, essentially can spend, in this case, 3 gold and 4 stone to get this, which is going to be 20 points. So the game's pretty standard worker placement, resource management. You're going to be getting points from building buildings. Some buildings themselves will give you points, like trading in 2 workers for 4 or 4 for 6. And you'll also be getting points by building the castle, as we talked about earlier. At the end of the round, whoever has the most points is the winner. All right, well, there's Caylus 1303. Let's start with the art, which is always very subjective, but I think they at least brought the art up to today's standards. I mean, you look at the original box, hideous, that guy grimacing. You look at the board, hideous, you know, just looks very boring. They made it look nice into today's art standards, so definitely a plus there. This is a mean worker placement game, and I typically like mean worker placement games, and this definitely delivers in that aspect of it. So if you don't like mean games, probably not the game for you, but if you do like those ones that have lots of conflict with worker placement, this does that well. It's probably the best part of this game. It definitely has tight resource management. If you like tight Euros, this is going to be one that you like. It's a little tighter than I would like, but it didn't feel overly constrictive too. It didn't feel like you were playing in a straitjacket like some Euros can. Passing is really interesting because when you pass, and the whole flow of the game is like this, you know, you're trying to figure out when's the right time to pass. It makes it harder for everyone else to place. And it really changes things because, like, oh man, everything's basically costing double because you got to pay an extra meeple as soon as any one player is passed. And it makes it harder, but it makes for some really interesting round end in the flow of the game and changing that. The Provost, best part of the game by far. Again, it's the meanest part of the game, but you're working with or against others. Some rounds you're gonna be with people, where maybe you and somebody else has the building closest to the end, and you're both working to push that Provost up so you both get to use the building, but somebody else can be pushing it back. Of course, you could say you're helping each other, and then because of the way that the passing happened and what order things are, you could tell them, yeah, go ahead, move it up. You move it up, and then you move it back just to screw them. Like, oh my gosh, this is by far the best part of this game and what separates it from other worker placement games. The favors are really, it's cool. You know, you can either get some cool goods and a new ability or steal an ability from someone else. That's really cool. That brings us to those special abilities. These weren't in the original edition. Never have played the original edition, actually. And after playing this one, I'm pretty glad I didn't. This one, the abilities are really cool. They're fun. They're different every game. You can mix and match them, things like that. The changing economy is cool, where when you build one of those starter buildings, it's taking those spots out, which is reducing or, you know, devaluing or valuing things more. So if you like, someone basically takes food completely out of the game, it's gonna be hard to, you know, bring stuff to the castle. So players are gonna be trying to build the other buildings, maybe the stone ones or the wood ones that have things like that in there. And I like that in the different games you can sort of change the economy, another cool aspect of this game. And I like the randomized setup, because it keeps every game a little bit different how things work, and the pros in the early rounds and things like that. So that's what I liked about the game. What I didn't like about the game is, again, this was originally back in 2005, but it is a pretty much get this, turn this into that, get point style of thing. It's very standard run-of-the-mill worker placement style in that aspect. Those style of things have sort of, I think, run itself to death. I'm kind of tired of seeing the same old thing. Granted, this was like the originator of a lot of that, so I got to give it a little bit of a pass there. But I'm, you know, measuring this to today's standards, and it was okay for me in that regard. The theme, very generic, doesn't really excite me, and you know, and for some of these reasons, I understand what they did from the 2005 version. I know what they've changed, and those changes seem to be really good. And the people that I played it with that has played the old one also agreed that those changes were positive. But for me, when in the end of the game, I have to judge this against the games that are coming out today. Is it a lot better than the other one, than the original? Sure. I haven't played it, but based upon what I've seen and what they've changed and talking about it, it definitely seems like it's been improved. But does it stand weight? Does it hold its weight in today's? Now, I did say that there are some unique things about this game. The way the provost acts, negotiating for things like that, and the changing economy. Those two things are the best parts of these games. But did those two things really separate itself out from all the other ones coming out these days? In my opinion, no. Like, would this even make my top 10 worker placement games? No, I don't think so. Now, others that I played it with liked it more than I did, but it's a good game. Is it a great game? No. Does it hold to today's standards? Sure, it was brought up to today's standards, but was it enough to stand out? Be like, wow, you've got to play this? In my opinion, it didn't do that, but I know that a lot of people love the original, and I know a lot of people like this version better than I did. So if you like tight Euros, you don't mind meanness and negotiations, and you like resource management, turning things into points, I think you're gonna like this one. For me, it was just okay, and that's what I think about Caylus 1303. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.